Thanks, Tara. Thank you so much for coming. I mean,
My
I know you know a number of the people in the room, but can you explain to the whole audience what is Whittle, and really what was the sort of the inspiration and drive for you to found it, and when did you do that?
Sure.
Give us a bit of background.
Sure, will do. Thank you. So Whittle is a collaboration community. It's a community of companies across hospitality, travel, and leisure that have come together to share best practices, to co-create solutions, to raise awareness, to make a difference from a diversity and inclusion perspective. It all started with an idea that I had 5 years ago. I found myself in settings like this, being in the minority. I found myself being on boards as the only woman, and I wanted to change things. I wanted to shake things up, and I wanted to see what the industry was doing to make change. And so the whole thing started with wanting to do a piece of research. I persuaded, at the time, PwC to help me do that research. They highlighted, this was 5 years ago, highlighted that there were pockets of excellence. There were some things that some companies across the industry were doing really, really well. And there were some things that were pretty bad. And they kind of started a conversation whereby we had a number of CEOs around the table. We discussed what we could do. And the idea of creating a collaboration community came very much from one of the CEOs in the sector, Keith Barr, the CEO of Intercontinental Hotels Group, who said, this is an area where, as an industry, we should not compete. This is an area where we must collaborate. And that's where the idea of coming together and trying to solve an issue that we are all facing at the same time came from.
Of underrepresentation. So, you know, for the people in the room, what are the practical things you do? So, I mean, if you're involved in Whittle, you'll probably have been to some of them, but can you give a sense of some of the things
Sure.
that you actually do?
So the focus at the beginning was very much on gender.
Yeah.
And that's why the W in Whittle stood for women in hospitality, travel, and leisure. And then very much evolved into a much broader conversation about not just representation, but inclusion. And so from gender, we started to talk about race and ethnicity, and currently 80% of what we do focuses on gender and race and ethnicity. And then more recently, the community has been asking for more awareness, more programs, more initiatives about the broader inclusion agenda. And so we started to talk about, like yesterday, for example, we did a webinar on Trans Awareness Week. We did something about National Coming Out Day a few weeks ago. We're talking about disability. So, and the way the community comes together is very much about, I see our role as being the role of an advocate. It's all about advocacy. We talk to a lot of industry leaders about what they're doing, and it's important for me that we are sharing all of this. So we provide opportunities for that kind of knowledge sharing, because something that works at Pizza Express might work at Nando's. Something that works at Green King might work at Stonegate. Will work. There is no reason why it shouldn't work. So it's providing that inspiration. In addition to that kind of opportunities for leaders to come together at different levels in the organization, we have a whole program of webinars and more recently, development programs. There is one initiative in particular that is probably, if you ask me, what is my proudest moment, it has been putting together the first cross-industry program that focuses on ethnic minority future leaders. And that came very much, it was an idea that we discussed within one of these committees that we ran, where we decided that we wanted to do something, and together we created something like a 6-month program that is making huge difference.
And so there's a number of companies of different sizes in the audience. You've mentioned a couple of fairly big ones. I mean, is it just for big companies, or is this something that you want everyone to be involved in?
Look, ideally, I would love for everybody to be involved in this, and this is a great opportunity, to talk about how the community works and what the work that we are doing together. I think that, my approach has been at the beginning to engage with the larger companies that were probably more advanced in their thinking and in their commitment to diversity and inclusion, and also had bigger budgets and resources to put into the diversity and inclusion agenda. But more and more we're seeing companies of all sizes joining, because the whole idea is that we can all benefit from the work that perhaps the bigger companies are doing, and there are things that everybody can do and can be inspired to implement in their organizations.
Yeah.
So it's a whole diversity now. We've got why Boston Lakes, very, very small business compared to a McDonald's or a Pizza Hut or a Nando's, and small hotel companies, small pubs, pub companies, small travel agencies, all joining in this conversation.
Yeah, and so can you just tell the audience about the sort of shift to this concept of inclusion? Because there was a big move this year, and there was a big, some of us were involved in it, a big festival of inclusion. That felt quite an important language shift.
So the whole idea of the festival was to bring together, lots of examples from different organizations to talk about the broader diversity and inclusion agenda. I have found that, with some people get the whole why it's important. Is it the right thing to do? Does it make business sense? However, when it comes to, positive discrimination, a lot of people have issues with that. So, but, who can challenge the concept of inclusion? Who doesn't want to feel part of an organization, part of a team? And that's it has a much broader appeal. It talks to more people. And so the festival was an opportunity to bring everybody together. We had a 2-day event. It was all virtual, had 70 plus speakers, 1,200 attendees. And we talked about age. We had very young people coming to talk about, their experience of working in our industry. We had very experienced people. We talked about, disability. We talked about gender, race. It was a whole spectrum. And, it was really about raising awareness of what we can do together and the power of that togetherness for the good of our industry.
I mean, one of the things I've been really impressed by is just the sort of senior sponsorship that, and the number of people that were prepared to really get behind this. I mean, is that something you found during COVID as well?
I think, in a way, the interesting thing, at the beginning of the pandemic, I thought, like, many companies around here, I think I found myself thinking, are we going to survive? Is everything going to stop? Everybody putting people on furlough, before the furlough scheme was announced, already, waves of redundancies. And actually what we have found is that the need to collaborate, the need to share, the need to do something together has been stronger than ever during the pandemic. So actually, we doubled in size. We positively impacted over 1.5 million employees through the companies that are part of the community. Now we are at 3.5 million employees through, the members of this community. And engagement of leaders has been quite, obviously very, very welcome, but also surprising, because there's so much to do,
going on,
but still, so much involvement and a desire really to make a difference and go beyond just signing a charter and saying, I'm a signatory of, but really being engaged in the conversation.
I think we've got a little video, haven't we? I think we've got a video that shows that. You're going to recognise some faces. So this was a video that was played at the Festival of Inclusion. But I think it's fantastic just to see the leadership here.
I stand together.
I stand together.
I stand together.
I stand together with all of my colleagues in Restaurant Group in support of inclusion.
I stand together with 8,500 colleagues here in the UK and over 16,000 across Aramark, Northern Europe in support of inclusion.
I stand together with 600 team members at Holford.
With 140 of my Scotland team in Singapore, California and the UK.
with our over 500,000 employees here at Compass
in support of inclusion.
I stand together with everyone at Virgin Atlantic,
with the 3,200 employees of Pure Gym in full support of inclusion.
I stand together with all Hilton team members around the world,
with all 5,800 of our people in Pizza Express,
with 4,500 motor colleagues in support of inclusion.
I stand together with 40,000 employees at Greene King in support of inclusion.
I stand together with the hundreds of thousands of men and women working across intercontinental hotels and resorts.
With 2,000 colleagues of the gym group.
With our 5,000 Welcome Break team members.
16,500 Nandokas.
With 8,000 Haven team members.
130,000 employees across the UK and Ireland.
17,500 team members in our born organisation.
In support of inclusion.
In support of inclusion and diversity.
That's brilliant. So before we ask...
So perhaps before we move on, there are lots of CEOs in here that are not featured in that video that I would love to have you participate in this campaign of all of us standing together in support of inclusion. So I'm going to find you.
She really will, if you know Taya. Okay, I just wanted to, we're going to move on now, but I just wanted to ask a question. I mean, it's all very well, yes, here they are. Here are our panelists, Lorraine and Nick Mckenzie, and we're going to move on to a conversation about race, because actually you said it yourself, Taya, this started off as a conversation about promoting female representation. I think we've made a bit of progress on that, haven't we?
We have made some progress, but looking around, I was looking around with Zoe earlier, and how many women are represented at this conference, and we're not 50-50. It's clear. So there is work to do, but the commitment is there. Change is taking place from a gender perspective, and a lot of companies have prioritized gender over other underrepresented groups. So when we look at the numbers from an ethnicity perspective, we are behind other industries. We are, not even at the beginning of the journey. There is so much more that we need to do and we can do. And so the whole idea has been to bring, here with us, Nick Mckenzie and Lorraine Cobbs to talk about the topic of race and ethnicity in our industry. So Nick Mckenzie, I know we were not supposed to sit and put Nick on his own there.
I think I'm okay.
As a bloke, no, that's okay. He won't feel too lonely there. But so Nick Mckenzie, CEO of Greene King. I think I'm allowed to say leading pub retailer. There are lots of pub companies here, but leading pub retailer and brewer. So Nick has been Greene King for the last couple of years. Before he's been running businesses all around the world, and at Merlin for a long time, Merlin Entertainments, where we all met actually. Nick and myself and Emma, we worked together for a period of time, and Lorraine Cobbs, who has been in the industry for nearly 20 years, coming up to 20 years, I think, and in different roles, leading the procurement function in many organizations, from Elior UK to TGI Fridays, and Corbin & King, Gordon Ramsay, lots and lots of businesses, and she's the founder and the leading force behind Be Inclusive in hospitality. So perhaps if we can start, Nick, with you. I think you've made your mission. You joined the company and you talked very early on about wanting to make the business a more diverse and inclusive workplace, from the pub floor through to top-tier management, and with a mission to create more opportunities for more people. So just really, help us understand, what are your D&I priorities? What are the things you've been focusing on?
Yeah, thanks, Tara. Look, first of all, it is a big priority for the business, not least because we're on actually a big culture drive. We're changing the culture of the business, and I think inclusion and diversity is right at the centre of that. Our priority is to create a business that is more inclusive, and for really good reason. I think we need to bring a more inclusive workforce into Greene King, but I think the same is true of the sector. I came back into pubs I say 2.5 years ago, and I'd worked in the pub sector back in the 90s. But you know, when I joined Greene King, I have to say I was pretty surprised at the lack of diversity in the business. And that sort of spurred me on to say, look, we need to make a change here. And for me, it's about how can we get more diverse thinking into the business? How can we get, you know, a more diverse workforce and more people wanting to work for Greene King? And I think Emma mentioned it earlier. You know, we're all struggling getting people into our businesses at the moment, and I want to bring people from all backgrounds, all ethnicities, gender, sexuality, whatever we can into the business to create ultimately a better business and make better decisions.
Okay, and we've got lots of CEOs here, lots of senior leaders. You know, just to share with us about you as a CEO leading the charge on inclusion. Why does it matter to you on a personal basis? Why is it important?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a business imperative, but frankly, if I'm not going to do it, who is? You know, people will follow my lead on this and have done. And actually, through some things I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment, it has actually, particularly from a race diversity perspective, become quite personal for me. And I want to change the business for the better. And that's why, you know, I've really taken a lead on this, not just in the company, but I think doing things like this, working with you guys, then I want to try and help change the industry as well. And I think it's the right thing to do, but I also think it's the important thing to do to improve the business as a whole.
Okay, so let's come to talk about, you know, race and ethnicity in particular. So, you know, I think it was one morning everybody woke up and there was an article in the Telegraph listing Greene King as one of a very few number of companies with historical links to slavery.
Yeah.
So, you know, just tell us what happened then. What did that mean for you? What did it mean for your organization?
So look, yeah, it was in the news. It was quite a big story. It was around the time of George Floyd, so you know, quite rightly, a big story. I have to say, this is to do with a founder of Greene King, one of the founders of Greene King, who I wasn't aware of this, was involved in the slave trade, argued against the abolition of slavery, and that had got picked up. You know, it was well known, I guess, in sort of some of the history of Greene King, but not many people were aware of it, and it was a bit of a shock to me, and I think it was a big shock to the organisation. We came out at the time, quite rightly, I think, and apologised. We said that we thought it was abhorrent, and what we did say, though, is we can't do anything about our past, but what we can do is try and change the future, and you know, we decided to take a real step back. What we didn't want to do was come out and say we do all sorts of different things and just make that a statement of fact, when actually we weren't doing that much. And therefore we said, right, we need to really understand the position here. We need to understand data. And I think we might talk about this later on, but there was no data in our business about ethnicity. So we started to understand that. And you know, I basically took a leadership position and said, right, I'm going to lead a team here to try and develop a strategy to improve race diversity in this business and in the industry. And that's what we've been working on for the last sort of 18 months and 2 years. Doing it in a thoughtful way, doing it in a planned way, but taking real action. And I know, and I'm sure everyone would say the same, if you're trying to make this sort of change, it takes a long time, and therefore you have to have a real strategy in place to take real action.
Okay, so give us some practical examples of things that you've been doing to, you know, start a conversation and you know, trying to improve the representation, but the culture.
The first thing we did was listen. I spent a lot of time talking to people from all different ethnicities outside the business. I did a round table actually with about 15 people from different parts of the black community, different stakeholders, and listened a lot. And we spent a time on the back of that developing our plans, and we developed a race charter. And that put some commitments down for the medium to long term to say, this is how we're going to change representation in our business over a period of time. We put employee-led groups into the business, and we listened to those teams. We've done some real stuff. We've changed some names of our pubs that we felt were inappropriate, that had racist connotations, and I have to say that caused you know, quite a lot of incoming messages from people. Some agreeing with what we were doing, some that we weren't, but it sent a real message out to our organisation, is actually we're going to make change. We've put a team in who, their sole focus is diversity and inclusivity, and we hadn't had that before. So there's a myriad of things that we've done. We've developed more partnerships to help bring more people from a more diverse background into our business, like the Prince's Trust, and working with some of our existing charities. So there's a long list of things that we've done, but it was done in actually in quite a strategic way. And it feels like it's starting to make a difference. We are not anywhere near where we need to be. We were just talking earlier. We have 83% of our people now tell us about what their ethnicity is, and we have 5% of our employees are people who could experience racism. 5%, and I think that may be fairly telling across the pub industry, particularly, actually.
So with your focus on this area, you touched a little bit on the customers' feedback. What has been the response from employees and customers?
Yeah, it's been pretty good. I mean, look, again, it's very, very early stages, but I've had people come up to me in the business and say that they feel change is happening. And I've had women in the business come to me and say in 2 years that it's changed. And I've had people from our employee-led group come to me and say, thank you for doing this. We now have a voice. So you can start to see change happening. I think the other thing that is really positive, actually, is we're getting more and more people now who are calling out, both from a customer perspective and from an employee perspective, incidents of racism, sexism, whatever it is in the business. And I'm really pleased with that. I'm starting to see stuff coming through that I never saw before, that maybe was getting brushed under the carpet. And I think people are feeling much more comfortable now about coming forward and saying, there is a problem here, we need to fix it. And I take that as my personal responsibility then to act on those sort of situations.
And, I think it was last month that you announced the reverse mentoring program you've just launched with everybody on the executive board involved in that. Just tell us a bit, how you came about. Was it your employees asking to put in place something like that? What feedback I know it's early stages still, but what are you hoping to achieve with that program?
For me, it is entirely about learning, me personally, and I think I've learned a lot over the last 18 months since the Benjamin Green announcement, and basically every single one of my executive team, bar one, is white. I have one lady who's Asian and only just joined the team, so we have no lived experience of this. And I think the reverse mentoring thing was just about educating us, getting us to understand some of the situations that people in our business go through day in, day out, whether that's within the business or whether that's outside. My mentor is a lady called V. She's from Kenya. She's been in the country for 4 years. She came into the country with no qualifications. She's now running one of our bigger pubs in the southwest. And she sets me homework. We meet on a weekly basis. She leaves me voice messages the whole time, and I can ask her questions. And for me, personally, it's been brilliant. And I think the rest of the team would say the same as well. Yeah. It's early stages, but I think if we can learn one or two things, and then we apply that in the way we operate the business, then the mentoring process really works.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. I mean, I think it'd be great now to talk to Lorraine.
Yes.
This is your business. You coach organisations in terms of programs like this.
So Lorraine, I was just about to come on to you. Thank you, Nick. And so what's the mission of being inclusive in hospitality?
Sure.
What is the aspiration?
Okay, I'll start though by just giving you some context in terms of me. So I have worked in the hospitality sector, as you said, for almost 2 decades. For the past 10 years, I've been on leadership teams or director. In any decision-making room that I'm sat within, I am always the only black or person of colour in any decision-making room is the first. Second to that, procurement is my discipline, my background, what I do. And for that reason, the function is very outward-facing. So I go to a lot of awards, events, work with a lot of suppliers, and you know, my experience over the past 20 years is all of those spaces have mirrored the same problem, in which hospitality often celebrates its diversity and talks about how many ethnicities exist within the organizations, but the reality of the fact is, if you are of color, you generally occupy a really junior, low-paying role. And I felt compelled to incorporate my not-for-profit because I don't believe the conversation was being had from a, what is the problem that we need to resolve? I think since 18 months ago, there was a huge amount of focus on the optics of diversity, and we've seen that, you know, across the sector, but in actual fact, what are the problems that we're trying to address? And so, Be Inclusive Hospitality, in effect, we conduct independent research and insight projects, and we have two key pillars. The first is that we support people of color, whether that is employee or entrepreneur, to support upward social mobility. And the second is we work with organizations as a D&I consultancy. So we deliver things like workshops talking about race specifically, advisory board, and consultancy in terms of culture audits. And the reason why I mention the advisory board is what I'm often told by many of the business leaders that we work with. You know, you have 10 white people in a boardroom having a conversation about what's best around D&I, and there's not that objectivity there. And it does make a really significant difference if that person is a fairly junior member of the team, and that's the reality. So that's what we do. Our mission is to accelerate race, equity, and equality within the sector, and that's how we have delivered it for the past 18 months almost.
Okay, and you mentioned about the research and the insight that you conduct. So, you know, can you share some of the findings of your surveys?
So, to date, there's been 2 pieces of work conducted. So, by nature of what I do, mention procurement, quantify everything, or like to. And so when I set out on the task to incorporate this business, I started seeking out data, and there was none. So the Resolution Foundation kindly analysed consensus data and started to identify some disparities that exist by ethnicity. And it's the usual topics, as in there's pay disparity, that level of education doesn't correlate with how much you're being paid. And then since that time, we conducted the Inside Hospitality Survey, which is a hospitality-wide survey across all employees at all levels. And some of the findings from that, which was released in June of this year, was that, you know, over half of all people of colour within the industry have experienced or witnessed racism within their workplace. I think what was really alarming about that is the most likely place to report that was outside of the business instead of HR or a senior manager. Another interesting fact is, and not surprising, that 60% of those respondents surveyed have received any education or insights into race and ethnicity. And there's obviously 2 sides to this coin. There's firstly that hospitality is a diverse industry, albeit by ethnicity sits within certain pockets of the industry. But secondly, you have diverse customers. And so those insights and that learning and education can benefit businesses in 2 ways. And it's one of the reasons why we developed Talking About Race, because of the importance of being able to comfortably talk about, you know, ultimately I believe if you can't talk about it, you can't address it. And so getting comfortable with talking about it is a really important first step, and we facilitate that.
Okay, so on that point, you know, we were having a conversation yesterday with Nick about, you know, so many people want to do the right thing, but so many leaders are also scared of saying the wrong thing, offending somebody, just not getting the language right.
Yeah.
And I've noticed you use the expression people of color.
I do,
you know,
yeah.
some people say, oh, I don't like to be called people of color. You know, I prefer to be called, you know, ethnic minority. You know, more recently somebody told me, oh, you shouldn't use the word minority because you're pointing a finger at, you know, that group being a smaller group. And so you just, okay, so, you know, let's drop the word minority. Let's just talk about ethnicities. And so what's your advice to people here who might be wondering, I really want to tackle this, but I'm scared of getting it wrong?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things really. The first is that how we identify is personal. And so, you know, in the very same way, I personally don't like the term ethnic minority. Someone else that's a black female might not mind it, so it's personal. There's two things that are really required here, I believe. The first is being brave, because the reality of the fact is that language is evolving and it doesn't stay the same. So there's going to require not only being brave to use language, but also to educate yourself. We live in an information age. There are businesses like Taya's, like mine, that will provide resources and education so that you can improve your understanding and knowledge. But it's also going to require independent self-education. You know, the reality of the fact is that for many of you that are sitting in your boardrooms, you don't have anyone that looks like me, that you know is within that space that you can ask that question. And so it's about really how you seek out that information independently. And you know, I look at it very simply in that over the past 18 months, obviously it's been an extremely difficult time for the sector. But what we have learnt from this is if something is important to your business, then you'll do it and you'll seek out that knowledge. And you know, a lot of people in this room are leaders, and I don't know very many people that are leaders who aren't also courageous. So it's about whether you lean into that, you know, dependent on the topic.
Yeah. So education, awareness, you know, just, you know, talking about it, listening, you know, Nick talked about, you know, listening to employees. You know, you have been involved with a number of different organizations. Are there things that you have seen in addition to things like reverse mentoring and, you know, other initiatives that you might want to highlight to the audience?
I think the single most insightful starting point, and I say starting point because, you know, as Nick had said, this is definitely a marathon, it's not a sprint, it's not something you're going to see immediate returns on. But the single most insightful repeated task that I've seen take place is conducting a engagement survey. You know, call it culture audit, call it what you like, but understanding what's going on within your business and being able to actually analyze that data by ethnicity, by gender, whatever the demographic, being able to actually understand that information is super insightful, because ultimately for many businesses who have a mission and values and they believe that the culture is being lived and breathed within their business, often engagement surveys might tell them otherwise, especially when you start to look at how that differs between different groups. So I feel as that is a starting point. It's something that benefits your business across the board to know how your teams feel. And being able to actually tailor solutions to different subsections of your organization is the kind of quality of that data is what is going to inform any decision you make from there onwards.
Yeah. And it's also the ability to, you know, measure the progress. If you don't have a starting point, you know, how do you know that you are making improvements?
Absolutely.
What initiatives do you have coming up that you are focusing on going forward?
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned that last year we conducted the Inside Hospitality Survey.
You're allowed to do a plug.
Pardon?
Done a plug.
I am. I don't hold back in plugging.
We'll plug anything up here.
So actually next Monday we're due to launch the second Inside Hospitality Survey. And what I really do encourage is for all of you to take part in the survey and share it with your teams. The difference this year to last is last year we had a sort of part support by a company who supported us on the survey, and we self-funded the actual report, which meant that we charged for it. This time around, we have a number of industry sponsors who will cover the cost of producing the report, so it will act as a free resource to the industry. So ultimately, what we will walk away from with, or in March of next year, we'll have an industry-wide survey, which will give you an insight into hospitality by subsector, so that's something really important. The second really quick thing is at the beginning of next year, we are launching a partnership with Uber Eats, and I am looking for 10 mentors, so restaurant leaders to act as mentors for black business owners. So we only need 6 hours over a 6-month period. So if you are a business owner and you'd be up for some mentoring, please get in touch, or message me or come over after this.
Thank you very much, Lorraine.
No
Mika,
problem.
can I come back to you with a final message to the audience about, just embracing this journey, getting on the journey? I always say, like, you can't afford not to be on the journey. You have to be on the journey. So from you, CEO, to lots of CEOs and senior leaders here, what's the final message?
Look, I think the world's changing. I think there's stuff happening right now that is going to make a real change in society, actually. And from my perspective, I think if we don't, as businesses, really push around diversity and inclusion, we are going to get left behind. And for me, it's about making sure you really understand what's going on in your business, really understand what makes people tick, and get the data. Find out what's happening and where you are, across all of diversity and inclusion, not just around race, but that's where we've started. But get the data and start to educate yourself and educate people in the business. And I think, in the long term, those rewards will come through in terms of creating a better business and bringing more diverse people into your business.
Thank you.
And what's your final message, Taya? You've been a champion of this. What's your final message for the audience?
Yeah, I think, tying into what we've heard earlier on, I think, for me, the senior leaders' agenda today is about climate change. It is about sustainability, and it is about inclusion. So, you all individually, all of us have a responsibility to act. We all have a responsibility to have a conversation, to go beyond signing a charter and a commitment, to act and to make a difference. So I would love to welcome you to the community. I think that together we can make a real difference and have a really, truly inclusive industry which will benefit all of us.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, I think this has been a really, I'm sure you all agree, a really inspiring session, and I massively appreciate the honesty of both of you. I think there's going to be a slide now which is, there are two fabulous organisations on the stage. So if you are involved in either of them, kind of recommit, get more involved. It's not a Friday afternoon task, but also if you're not, those are the details, and I'm sure Peter will be sharing them. This is something a little bit like sustainability where we should be collaborating. And I was quite struck by, I just think the way you're breaking it down into simple things to do, and the same on the sustainability conversation, it just feels like that's an important thing for everyone to take away. So thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
That was fantastic. Yeah.